Jerry Palm. My God, he does a great job. There he is with us, CBS Sports Bracketology. We've had Jerry on a lot in the years we've done this show, even before that on local radio. All right, Jerry, how many coaches, it's not quite that time, but how many coaches are banging up your cell phone asking you where they are right now?
I don't hear from a lot of coaches directly. I'll hear from, SIDs, ops managers, people like that. I don't really hear as much from the coaches unless I happen to be in the building. And then every once in a while I will. I used to hear from Scott. Scott Drew every once in a while, but it's been a while. And he hasn't really needed my help much lately because his team's been very good.
He might now. He might right now. Where do you have them? Well, you brought it up. They're sliding, and they are not playing well.
Yeah, I've got them as a 9 currently. And they've got a big game with Cincinnati, and it's an even bigger game with Cincinnati, for Cincinnati, that is, because they're trying to crawl themselves onto the bracket, and beating Baylor at home is almost going to be a requirement for Cincinnati to try and get their way in. But it's important, obviously, for Baylor, too. I don't think of Baylor as a bubble team yet, but there's still, a couple of weeks or so to go. So anything could happen. But I feel good about Baylor making the tournament. I don't know that I feel great that they're going to get a very good seed.
Jerry, the Big 12 has been surpassed, at least this season, by the SEC. You have 3 out of the 4 number 1 seeds coming out of that conference, and then Tennessee, a 2 seed right after it. Considering that Duke is going gangbusters right now, it's not really possible they would get all 4, is it?
Yeah, well, obviously Duke is one of them. They're in there, and unless something goes sideways with them, it's hard to imagine them not being a number 1 seed. But Tennessee is 5th overall. Houston is number 6, and so Houston really has a shot that they could possibly push to the 1 line as well. The SEC tournament is going to hand at least 3 of those 4 teams a loss.
Oh, that's just because that's exactly right.
Just now occurred to me that was going to happen when you said it, Jerry. Kansas, you have down on the 6 line right now, and they're just in a bad way. As Kansas goes, they've got talent, but they don't have chemistry. What do you see as their reasonable ceiling for this year, and could they move up off of that, or do you feel they're more likely to go down before they get to the tournament?
They've got a schedule that gives them a chance to move up. They finished with Texas Tech at home, at Houston, home Arizona. That's 3 teams ahead of them in the bracket. If they win the home games and do something in the conference tournament, they have a chance to move up. But if they're not up to the task of those 3 games, they could be moving down to the middle of the bracket, which they could join teams like UConn and Gonzaga in the middle of the bracket and among the teams that we'd never really expect to see there.
How many times have you? Is that one, Mike?
Yeah, no, just go.
How many times have?
That might be your mic.
We're falling apart. How many times have you seen a team with a 14-2 quad 1 record like Auburn has right now?
Not very many. There's only been 3 teams that have more quad 1 wins in a season in the 30 years I've been doing this, and 2 of those got them in years when the quadrants weren't called quadrants. They've always had 4 buckets for the games, but they didn't start calling them quadrants until they added home, road, neutral components to it and became too cumbersome to say it. But yeah, it's a remarkable season, a dominant regular season, and to do so in a conference as good as this one is makes it even better.
I want to ask you a question to go back. Somebody asked this in the on a direct message to me. We mentioned Scott and Baylor. I want to get to the rest of the Big 12, including Houston, et cetera, Arizona, Texas Tech. The loss to Colorado was bad. That's a team that had 1 conference win, and they lost to Colorado. How damaging was that loss, or does it really drop you much just because of what else you've already done?
Did you know that most calorie deficit calculators don't work? My dietitian recommended the Lasta to me, and it turned out to be the only one that got my calorie deficit right. Thanks to it, I lost 14 pounds in 1 week. Ready to kickstart your journey to healthy weight loss? Calculate your ideal calorie deficit using the Lasta app right now.
It depends on where you are in the bracket. Are you talking about Baylor losing to Colorado?
Yeah,
you are, right?
yeah.
Kansas didn't lose to Colorado.
Yeah.
They lost to Utah, but not Colorado. So it's a quad 2 loss. It's a road game. It's not the worst loss in the world. They've got 9 losses better than that, but it's not terrible. It's not a quad 3 loss. It's not like losing to Seton Hall in the Big East or anything like that. But it can hurt you. And when you are in the middle of the bracket where they are, you have more teams that look a lot alike, as opposed to at the top end or even the bottom end. But at the top end of the bracket, there's greater separation among those teams in terms of the quality of their resume. In the middle of the bracket, you all look the same. So if you take a loss like that, it hurts more because there are more teams that can jump you because you're so much alike. They also, though, a lot of those teams have losses like this one, which is why they're down in the middle of the bracket.
How much damage, if much at all, other than if you're trying to get in the tournament, Jerry, does a conference tournament loss hurt you?
It's just another loss. The committee does not give special credence to the conference tournaments. The thing that conference tournaments have is neutral site games. So it's not a home game or a road game. It's a neutral site. And the winner of the tournament is an automatic qualifier, and the committee definitely needs to know that. Otherwise, it's just another game, one of 33 or 4. And it has no special importance because it's being played late in the season or in a tournament.
Jerry Palm with us, CBS Sports Bracketology with us on 365 Sports.
So, Jerry, as I look across your 68-team bracket here, the mid-majors are not as prevalent as they were because we've got these massive – I mean, the SEC right now is eating up a ton of spots that would normally go to them in another year, but these are bigger conferences now. Is this distressing for fans of schools of that type, and which one of the mid-majors do you think could make a legit run up to and wreck some of these Power 4 schools?
Well, do you consider St. Mary's and Gonzaga? I mean, you have to define mid-major for me because that is a nebulous term, and it doesn't mean the same thing to any 2 or 3 people that you ask.
Yeah, like the Big East doesn't mean a mid-major to me.
But the Big East is a major conference. There are 5 major conferences in basketball.
Yeah, Gonzaga, it's hard to say that about them because of who they've been. St. Mary's because of who they've been. And so, look, like someone like Drake, teams like that, is that mid-major to you?
I don't use the term because because you're either major or you're not, your conference. So for me, and because mid-major conferences are offended at being called mid-major conferences. So I just
like group of 5 in football sometimes they can get a little upset about that. Okay, all right, that's fair.
So I just leave it. But I like Drake. I actually like St. Mary's more than I do Gonzaga. Gonzaga's got a weird resume, which if you got a minute, we can talk about later. But VCU is currently leading the A-10. But Drake and VCU, teams like that, have to win their league to get in. They're not at-large teams. So, if those teams can win their league, great, because I think VCU is no fun to play because they come after you at both ends of the floor. They really go hard. Drake is just a really skilled team with a new coach and a bunch of guys he brought with him from his previous stop in Division II. And they have gelled, and they really play well. I think those 2 teams, if I'm going to stay away from the West Coast Conference and the Mountain West Conference, those 2 teams, I think, have got the best chance to surprise somebody.
Yeah, let's talk about the Zags, Jerry. They do have a very weird, they have a couple of quad one losses that were like big margins. They have quad one wins. They're all over the place in a way Mark Few has never seen before.
Actually, they haven't lost any of their games by big margins. I don't even know if they have a double-digit loss. Looking real quick, they do not. Okay. They've got 8 of them, but none of them are double digits, and that's partly why their resume is so weird. In the predictive metrics, which are the ones that are heavily influenced by margin of victory, like the net and KenPom, they're top 15. Their average ranking is 11 in those 4 metrics. In the ones that don't care about margin of victory and just measure the quality of your resume, they're in the mid-40s. I don't remember ever seeing a team so disparate in these 2 groups of rankings. And if you look at their resume, it looks a lot more like the 40s. Their best wins are Baylor, which I have as a 9 seed, San Diego State, which I have as a 10, and Indiana, which I have among my last 4 in. That's not the kind of quality that merits a ranking in the teens or the 20s for that matter. So I have Gonzaga in the middle of the bracket. I actually have them on my bubble, although I think they're a win away from coming off of it. They're going to play at Santa Clara this week. And Santa Clara beat them at home, though. So that's, they've got 2 losses to teams that aren't going to make the tournament. And that's one of them. It's been a weird year for Gonzaga. Memphis is a little bit similar in the opposite way. The margin of victory metrics hate them, but the resume metrics love them. The margin isn't quite as different, but I think Memphis is a team that's going to be underseeded because of it.
Jerry, you know all about how they break this down, and there's a few questions other than just teams. Does losing a game in December any different than losing a game in February? Where a team was ranked then, does it matter? How does that all work out?
Okay, so the games are when they're played is irrelevant. What a team was ranked when the game was played is irrelevant. And if you're talking about the AP poll is never relevant. Current, former, whatever, they don't look at it.
Right.
So the polls that you see in the newspaper or on the internet are not criteria at all. So they've got 7 metrics; those are criteria. But the AP poll and the coaches poll are not. And the date that the game was played, it's on the team sheet, but nobody cares when you played it.
Yeah, Jerry, it is weird to me that you would apply like a top 25 metric like we've done for football, when now maximum it's been 12 teams in the playoffs. So it would make sense to know what, from 12 to 25, like what is too deep of who could be the best 12 teams. But when you're talking about taking 68 teams, 25 is not representative of college basketball in any way, shape, or form.
No, it's 350-something teams,
yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah, 364. Yeah, they keep adding them. They may have added another one last week. The other thing, though, is that the rankings, the net, is not used to pick the teams. I mean, they're not. It's not. In the college football playoff, they rank the teams, and the top 12 are the playoff teams. Well, they don't use the net for that. The net is really sort of sorting games into buckets, and then the net ranking is not always reflective of the quality of the team. We just discussed Gonzaga, for example. But so they're looking at, and not all quad one wins are the same either. So they go in fine detail in analyzing everybody's schedule and results and what they've done. And there's a subjective part to it because everyone has their own opinion on these teams. And they have their own opinion on the merits of some of these metrics that they're using. So, it's much more of a subjective process guided by objective data than the college football playoff, which is just straight on. Here's your rankings, 1 to 12, you're in.
All right, now I'm asking a question based on something I thought I read, and I can remember things pretty well as far as when I see them. Is there something to break? Is there something that you can throw darts at what Duke has done? They're hot. They're a number 1 seed. But did I see something where people were wondering about something about who they are? They lost to Kentucky. They lost to Kansas and Clemson. What would it be, if anything, or am I making that up?
Well, I think people question their schedule because the rest of their league is brutal. Clemson's good. Louisville's good. They'll be top half of the bracket teams. Everyone else, they may get one more team in, maybe 2. bottom of the bracket, maybe. And that, in fact, the fact that the rest of the league is so bad hurts Duke because they're not getting the competition they need. It hurts the teams outside of those three because they can't resume build unless they beat Duke. And, North Carolina is 1-10 in quad one games. And that just screams we're not an NCAA tournament team. But they haven't had a quad one game for a long time. And they're not going to get one until the season finale against Duke. And if they don't win that one, they're not going to get another one until they get to Duke or maybe Clemson and Louisville in the tournament. I mean, it's just there's so few opportunities to resume build in that league. And that's probably what people are questioning about Duke is that you've been steamrolling this really bad league. And by their standards, certainly. So that's probably what people are questioning. I don't know. They look pretty good to me.
Big 12, 8 teams. Does that seem to be the number? What Cincinnati does, what Baylor does, that seem to be the number you're talking about?
Yeah, BYU is part of that. Could still go one way or the other, and they're currently going in the right direction. They're on a hot streak. It's funny. I saw BYU at Cincinnati 2 weeks ago. I don't think they've lost since, but they were awful in the second half of that game. So it's yeah. I mean, but BYU is I've got them as a 10. I've got Baylor as a 9. I've got those two teams, and then Cincinnati is trying to push their way on. They've done well recently too. So that Cincinnati Baylor game is more important for Cincinnati than it is for Baylor, but it's important for Baylor too.
Jerry, if they expand this tournament to 76 or more, is there justification for that outside of them just trying to make more money?
You mean justification in terms of quality? No, you're going to add 8 teams worse than the ones we're talking about. Even worse than the ones we're talking about. And they're not expanding for VCU. They're not expanding for Drake. They're expanding for Syracuse or Xavier or, whatever. Those are the teams they're expanding for, and that's the problem I have with it. I'm, by the way, firmly, steadfastly in favor of going back to 64.
I could not agree with you more, Jerry. We had Brett Yormark on a year ago now, and I straight up told him, I said, he was going to an NCAA tournament game that night. I said, if you went seat to seat and asked everybody at the NCAA tournament, would you like more of this? All of them would say roundly no. It's very firm. No one asked for this.
Here's the thing.
Fan-wise.
Nobody's watching the first 4 now. Yeah. Unless you're involved or you're a sicko like me.
Yeah.
Your team's involved. But, you're going to add another, 8 games to that? And it's literally the casual fan wants to know when you get to 64 so they can fill out their bracket. All the rest of that is just superfluous. So I don't even know how much of a money grab it is, but there must be something to it because otherwise I don't think they'd be doing this.
Well, it's like we said before, and we know you got to go, but you have something that seems to be pretty perfect right now, and it was at 64, and then they do all this. And, yeah, the bracket, that frustrates people because I sometimes get confused and outthink myself on who's going to play that, play-in game or whatever. Speaking of that, Texas, they have nice wins. But, man, they are just not very good. They have a record of 16-11, but they're going to beat Kentucky and then lose badly to South Carolina. Are they a tournament team?
Well, they've got a problem. They're 2 games below 500 against the top 3 quadrants. Only one team like that has made it the NCAA tournament the 30 years I've been doing this, and nobody more than 2 games below. So they probably have to split their last 2, maybe win a game in the conference tournament, their last 4, and win a game in the conference tournament, or maybe go 3-1 down the stretch. They have the most manageable schedule of the bubble teams in the SEC because they're playing 3 other bubble teams and Mississippi State on the road. So they've got a manageable schedule, but it's SEC schedule. So manageable is relative.
Jerry, thank you very much, buddy. Appreciate your time as always.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Jerry Palm, JP Palm, CBS. JP Palm, CBS is his Twitter feed, and also CBS Sports Bracketology for men's basketball. Hope we answered a lot of questions.